I want to talk to you a little bit today about the formal meals that we used to have at the Zen Buddhist monastery where I cut my teeth. And the reason I want to talk to you about this is because I have shot hours of footage today on a completely unrelated topic. I won't even bore you with the details. And then I started thinking about food because I haven't eaten any today. And then I started thinking about taste. And then I started thinking about flavor. And I started remembering working in the kitchen at the monastery on cold winter days, as we are having today. Cold, gray. You can see I have my campfire lit here. Cold, snowy, wintry days up at the Mount Baldy Zen Center, sitting in the kitchen, making food for people, and knowing as we advanced in the training season, when I was the tenzo, I would think sometimes, early in the morning when I was just coming into the kitchen and setting up tea and putting on my hat and just being cold and uncomfortable, I remember thinking, wow, we're like 3 weeks into the Seichu training season now, and nobody's left camp. That means that the food that I've made is literally keeping people alive. I mean, that's my job. I mean, say whatever else you want about like all the roles that you have at a monastery. The tenzo role as cook is pretty important because it's your food that's keeping everybody alive. And food at a monastery is a really interesting thing. And food practice is a really interesting thing. Now, one thing you learn when you're tenzo and you're making food for everybody day after day after day is that like people have a lot of issues with food. I mean, I remember my girlfriend came to one of our retreats here in Austria. It was the first time she'd ever done any Zen retreat. And she's like, I was the Jiki-Jitsu, and I was the head monk of the Zendo practice. And so I had to lead everybody into the dining hall. And then I had to read the chant sheets. And later on, she was like, she told me, after the food came, she was like, are you effing kidding me? This is what we're eating? It was a basic Zen breakfast. I mean, but she has breakfast desires. She loves breakfast. And she'd been fine up to that point. But once the food came on the breakfast that day, that totally triggered her. And she remember her telling me, like, she's like, I heard you doing those meal chants. She's like, I just hated you. I hated you, she said. And that stuff happens all the time in the dining hall, formal practice. Or people will barge into the kitchen. In fact, we had a rule that you couldn't come into the kitchen at the monastery. You could not talk to the cook because inevitably the cook, the tenzo, the person in charge of creating food for the practitioners, doing food creation practice, the tenzo, we said that the kitchen was the tenzo's zendo. It was where they practice, right? We said nobody could come in there. They had to relay their food concerns to another officer because otherwise the tenzo would be doing nothing but fielding food concerns all day. So if you're a person who has issues with food, you are not alone. Okay, so now here's the deal. I'm going to just explain to you how these meals went, just so you can get a feel for how dense they were with ritual. Okay, so first of all, everybody had to leave the meditation hall. So there was a special. So the officer would come up from lower camp and they would ring a gong. And that would be calling the Zendo people down to the meditation hall. So then there was this complicated pattern that the Jiki-Jitsu would do on his bell that would announce to everybody that they should stand up, turn around, grab their bowl set, because we bring our bowl set Oryoki style to the Zendo with us. Then they would bow And everybody would bow together, and we would leave, and we would go down through the snow, we would walk through the dining hall, and we would come around at a sharp angle because all the tables were set up a certain way with a cup and a chant sheet there, set up a certain way. Everybody would line up a certain way. When everybody was lined up, paused together in the dining hall, the jikijitsu would ding, and everybody bows. And then you sit down in the chair, 3 per bench, right? And you've got your bowl set in your lap. So everybody's hungry, everybody's cold, but you don't get to space out at this time. You have to keep practicing in this like most human of moments. When you're going to take food into your body, you have to keep practicing. So the 2 people on the outside pull the bench out, everybody sits down, everybody pulls the bench out, everybody sits down all the way down the line, right? And then there's another moment of like everybody sitting together. And then I don't forget, the jikijitsu claps and does like a pre-chant, and then everybody starts chanting. So we've got a bunch of chants that are going on, and I'm at a loss as to what they were. Probably, I forget actually what the chants were, but there's an echo or an ino, which the jikijitsu is doing. It's like a pre-chant, and then everybody's chanting together, right? And you're unwrapping your bowl set in your lap. So you've got 3 bowls wrapped in a cloth. You've got a washcloth on top of that. Then you've got chopsticks and a spoon in a little chopstick and spoon sleeve. And then you've got a top cloth over that. So you're unwrapping this like rucksack of utensils and bowls in your lap. And then you lay the bowls out, 1, 2, 3 in front of you. Put your chopsticks down with the very end of the chopsticks hanging off the table about 1 inch. And bookending that is your spoon. And you're holding your chant sheet and you're chanting. Your eyes are straight ahead. So you're maintaining posture during your formal meal, right? So there's no back to the chair. You're not slouching. You're still in a meditative posture. So at one point during the meal chanting, you will do an offering to the hungry ghost, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon. Most of you probably know what a hungry ghost is. A hungry ghost has a really, really big head and mouth. So it's like this entity, this spirit of greed and hunger. And you watching this video, you have, like me, we all have greed and hunger for certain things, right? And the hungry ghost symbolizes that. Most of us have greed and hunger around food, you know? So the hungry ghost has a huge mouth and this enormous belly. And then it's got this tiny, tiny, slim, slender, thin, pencil, coffee straw, thin neck. And it can only get a little bit of food down. So it's constantly shoving food in its mouth and it's like trying to swallow. And it can't fill this big, fat, greedy, hungry belly that it has. So during these meals, we would take a little bit of our food and we would offer it to the hungry ghost. So the jikijitsu would do the meal, the hungry ghost echo. Jitem, gitem, zu, gokim, suji. Then everybody would chant, and you would hold a little bit of this food that you've taken from your plate, and you would do 3 circles over the fat part of your thumb. I'm not sure why. There was something about that. You would do it over the fat part of your thumb. And a muscular part right here. And then you would set it down on the table. At the end of the meal, the handikans, who were 3 or 4 servers bringing the food to you, would take the food offering away. So during this meal that you're very eager to receive because you are so cold and you are so tired and you are so hungry, you are actually giving some of that food away. So baked into a formal Zen meal is this principle of no greed and of honoring that part of ourself that craves food. Just please, world, just let me put something tasty from you in my body right now, right? Like there is so much ritual. There's more ritual around eating than any other aspect of a Rinzai Zen training monastery, in my experience, right? So, and there's a reason for that. It's because our desires are so unconscious and so deep and usually so unquestioned when it comes to meals, food, and eating. So the practice is drawing us into ritual as we eat so that we can do this fundamental human activity of eating in a way that is still commensurate with Zen principles and with Buddhist principles, which is to say, mindfully and with complete attention, but without greed or clinging or aversion, right? So, you finally do your eating, right? So the handikans have come, the servers, and you hand them your meal, your bowl. You hand them your bowl, and so you've got hand signals, right? So you hold your hands out like this, and when you want them to, they're putting food in your bowl. When you want them to stop, you go, and you better be clear about it. Because if they don't see you, you're gonna get twice as much food that you wanted, and you're gonna have to eat that food. So now, if you want a little bit more, but you don't want a full serving, that means half. And if you just want a little bit more, you go like that. So already, you've got a situation where you've got communication happening about your food. So people would go nuts with this stuff. They'd be like, and they'd try to get them to do a little bit more. But then if the Hondakan gave them too much food, they'd be like, you could see them across the room like, no, don't give me that food. I don't want to eat it, you know? So you've got all these little, it's like, episodes happening within the form for a formal meal, like ego, preference, desire expressing itself through this very narrow channel of hand signals, right? So finally, eventually the meal starts. And the meals, you know, there's 3 servings per each meal. Like you're never not on your toes, right? So you're eating, and there are condiments being passed down the tables, right? And so you pour soy sauce in your eggs or something in the morning. But if a person is using the condiment, then the person on either side of them has to put down their bowl. So you could never be eating while someone on either side of you was using the condiments. So there were other little rules like this to constantly keep you in the room and out of that indulgent pleasure zone that we can get into when we eat, when we feed our poor, tired, hungry bodies, right? Now, there's never a punitive quality to these rules at meals. There was a jikijitsu in the room correcting people, like bowl down, you know, bowl. By the way, I've never done a video on corrections, but this is like the sort of thing. So let's say I'm eating my meal and I don't notice that the guy's using salt or gomasio next to me, right? Then the jikijitsu like bowl down, and then if somebody didn't get it because they kept making the mistake, the jikijitsu might announce the actual rule. Bowl down when your neighbor, sorry, I just like a jikijitsu would do it. Manifesting jikijitsu, wonder powers activate. Bowl down when your neighbor's using the condiment. Like you're trying to say it flat. Bowl down, like without emotion, but kind of stern. No. Anyways, so there's rules. Not only were there rules in the dining hall, of course, there were rules about the food. Like the food was meant to be simple. Nutritious, but simple. I failed at this task when I was tenzo. I went out of my way to bend the rules and make the food as absolutely tasty as possible. I was starving at the monastery. I was so hungry all the time. So when I became tenzo, I really got it in my head. I was like the big, fat cook trying to get everybody as fat as I could. That's what I felt like. But that's really not the spirit of tenzo. And I understand that now. The spirit of tenzo is to serve not hateful food. Like sometimes you'd get a hateful tenzo. You get like boiled carrots for third bowl, and you're like, you're staring at the hatch because you know for the kitchen that slides open the hatch because you know the tenzo's behind there, and you're just like, I can feel your hate. Damn you for these boiled carrots, right? But mostly you were supposed to give people food that was nutritious but simple, right? So it was like first bowl was like a starch. In the morning it would be maybe oatmeal or creamed wheat or something, maybe a banana bread. Second bowl fruit, third bowl eggs. So you have third bowl is usually protein, especially in the morning. For lunch, you would have, and you always had to have some protein in each one of the bowls, or in one of the bowls. So you had to have enough protein because it's hard to get protein on that all-vegetarian diet. We're on an all-vegetarian, not vegan, but vegetarian diet at the monastery. So first bowl for lunch, let's say, would be a homemade bread. We made the best breads at the monastery. Sourdough, banana breads, sometimes biscuits and rolls. Ooh, I'm getting hungry. Second bowl would be like a soup, maybe a bean soup or a vegetable soup, all homemade. And then third bowl would maybe be salad. Then for dinner, white rice, miso soup, and then maybe a tofu square with a little bit of miso on top of it or something. So, some variations of these types of meals. The beginning of the week as tenzo during a retreat, you would come up with a menu, you would give it to the head monk. Usually you had to pass your menu, get your menu passed to the head monk, who's going to tell you, no, this doesn't work, you've got no protein here. Or weather forecast is for rain. I don't think you want to be doing a cold second bowl for breakfast. Maybe you want to do a fruit compote where you heat up the fruit, that sort of thing. So a ton of thought went into the preparation of the food, but it was always very, very painfully simple food. Now there's a reason for this, and this is the reason I've gone through explaining all of this to you about these meals. Something happened when you ate, I don't want to use the word mindfully, but I don't have another word. When you ate mindfully, let's call it taitoku. So taitoku is a word in Rinzai Zen Buddhism, which means to apprehend with the whole body. So the term mindful is inadequate, in my opinion, but it's helpful to use that term sometime. But more helpful is this principle of taitoku. So taitoku, you know how it is with taitoku. I talked about this last week. When a mother is holding a baby, she is apprehending the child with her whole body, right? Or when a great actor is doing a role, they are manifesting it with their whole body. Even if you're sitting at your desk and you're writing a novel, your whole body is contributing. You are apprehending the task with your whole body. So that's what we're doing in Zen practice. When we're sitting on the meditation cushion, we are manifesting the activity of just sitting completely. We're doing very simple things in Zen practice and at a Zen monastery, or if we are practicing Zen around our house, we're doing simple things completely. That's the whole practice, is you're doing something. So you're never alone. You're never contacting God or Buddha or doing something inside your head. Even when you're doing the simplest, most seemingly esoteric version of Zen practice, which is sitting and meditating, you are doing an activity, which is just sitting. And I've talked about what that means in other videos. When you are doing meal practice, you are also doing an activity. Now, the insight that I had, the experience that I had over the years at the monastery was an incredibly instructive one. When we would go through these formal meals day after day after day and receive this plain food with not a lot of taste, and a lot of the food it's not the kind of food I like in the first place. White rice, not a big fan, just don't like it. Nori seaweed, I don't know. Tastes like the Pacific Ocean smells when I go to Redondo Beach. Not a big fan. Bean soup, don't really like it. Don't like the texture. It's slimy and it makes me fart. I loved the homemade breads that we did at Mount Baldy. I liked a lot of the food, but again, it was not a diet that was designed to please the palate. So something else happens. A different experience arises because it's still very beautiful to eat. It's still very beautiful to eat, but you learn to take a different kind of pleasure in eating. It becomes not about taste anymore. You can begin to feel the pleasure of nourishment. The world is nourishing you, and you can feel it. You can feel it when the food comes into you, and you chew it, and then you swallow it, and it comes down into your body, and if you're practicing, you're in a meditative posture. You're holding your bowl. You don't have the bowl on the table. You're holding the bowl almost like you would hold a mudra. You got your spoon and you're eating. And I notice a kind of tension when I eat a lot of times. I'm like this, and I'm holding tension right here. You release your abdomen. You release your belly. You release your stomach muscles, right? You're breathing. You've got a circulation of air coming through. So it's not just you're holding your breath and throwing food down, right? But you're taitoku. You're taitokuing it, right? You're apprehending the task. You are completing the task with your full body. And as you do this practice, as you eat mindfully, you're not paying attention to the taste. You're just holding your body up straight, and you're putting the food in your mouth, and you're chewing it, and you're swallowing it. And it's important that the food is simple so that you are not distracted by the taste. And if my experience of doing these formal meals was that when one eats this way, when I ate this way, I felt this love coming from the world. I felt the pleasure, a kind of love, the love that comes from the fact that the world offers itself to me and my body to become a part of me. That's the point of a formal meal, for me at any rate, at a Zen Buddhist monastery. And I found that in many ways that practice has carried over into my life now. I tend to eat simply. Simple foods like well prepared with a little bit of salt and I use a lot of spices, but anyways, simple foods, well prepared, and you eat about 70% of what you need to eat. So 70% full was kind of the rule at the monastery. You don't eat until you're 100% full, not 95% full. Eat until you're about 70% full. That's all you need. A little bit of hunger is okay, you don't want to starve yourself. Obviously, you want to make sure you get enough food, but you don't need to eat to 100% full, and you don't need to eat to taste. Eat about 70%. Eat healthy foods that are well prepared, and then pay attention to your body when you're sitting and eating. Loosen your abdomen. Hold the bowl or hold the fork in a mindful way. Cut the meat, if you're a meat eater, in a mindful way. Cut the vegetables in a mindful way. Take the food up and put it into your body in a mindful way. Even if it's some of the best food you've ever eaten in your life, if you're eating in a practice, with a practice mind, then after a while, after you do this sort of mindful eating, you'll begin to experience a kind of nourishment. You're being nourished by the world. You're being nourished by the food. And there's a kind of love in that that's very different than a greed for taste, flavor, and calories. On a closing note, when I went back to America this past Thanksgiving, I was like shocked at how freaking good the food is, man. Like, Americans have the best food on the planet. Like, you go into a grocery store and it's actually beautiful. I went into Ascendix, which is sort of a slightly higher end grocery store in Wisconsin. It was a big grocery store. And it was flipping paradise. We have very small grocery stores here in comparison in Vienna, and they are simply stocked in comparison to American grocery stores. So I remember I was just shocked at how much food there was, how much flavor there was, how many options there were. So I think when I go to America, it's a lot harder for me to eat that Zen way, within a practice context. But most importantly, the simpler, the better, with just some flavor, but not overboard. Like, when you start getting into like lots of caffeine, lots of sugar, lots of fat, lots of preservatives, getting it out of a can, or getting it from a fast food place, or even from any restaurant, there's always tons of sugar, tons of fat, tons of calories. If you're the type of person who struggles with food, has food issues, you ain't alone. I mean, I look somewhat skinny, but I have my food issues, like, big time. Everybody has food issues. And I'm telling you, on the other side of the quest for flavor and pleasure from food is a much deeper satisfaction in the activity of being nourished by the world through food. And when we eat mindfully, that's what we're trying to do. So I just thought I'd make a video about food, because I've been trying to make a video on a different topic all day and I haven't eaten, and now I'm really, really hungry. And I'm gonna go put this Taitoku Zen meal practice into practice. If you want to help me buy groceries, you can support this channel here on patreon.com/Shozan Jack Hobner. I do Sunday sits with my patrons. I have essays and blog posts there, and generally speaking, a really nice little community over on Patreon. People message me privately with practice questions, which I love. Patrons do that. It gets me thinking. And they comment on my posts over on Patreon and comment to each other and read each other's comments. And it's a nice little community for lay practitioners, people who are trying to meditate in their homes, do meal practice in their homes, or just eat mindfully when they're at their jobs and they're out in their lives. Like, it's a community of people who are lay practitioners, lay Zen Buddhist practitioners. So if you want to support this channel, you can go there, patreon.com/Shozan Jack Hobner. You can also, to help the channel, hit subscribe and hit like and hit the notifications button. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Time to eat. Ciao!